Good afternoon, family, and welcome to another segment of the Black Male Community Council, Boots on the Ground, Black Man Standing. And today is a real special day for our interviews and the people that we will be interviewing. I am honored to be able to sit and talk today with Gamel Aziz, who was one of the first brothers and part of the founding team that created the concepts and the foundation of the Black Male Community Council. I regard Gamel as a brother that holds the integrity of our organization from a cultural and spiritual perspective, from an African perspective. And I'm so happy to be able to talk to him today in terms of that. So here's another brother who, as I say in a lot of the interviews, that will not be compromised, that holds his integrity to a point of understanding how badly we need that in order to be able to move forward. So I want to say good afternoon, Aziz.
Good afternoon.
And how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing fairly well, Dr. Creator.
Amen on that. Okay. So, Gamel, I'm glad that you were able to join us today for more discussions as we talk to the men in the Black Male Community Council in terms of their of who they are, and so that our audience can be able to get to understand the diversity in which we represent in terms of men that are in our organization, and their commitment to not just to the organization, but to our communities and our thematic of creating an atmosphere that our women, children, and elders can feel safe, but also an atmosphere that we maintain our culture and our dignity. And again, I want our audience to hear from you, Gamel, from that perspective. And first, I want you to talk about what drew you to the Black Male Community Council. Why did you stay? Right? And I ask everybody during the interviews, where do you see the Black Male Community Council 5 years from now? And where do you want to see us 5 years from now? So again, Gamel, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Wow, that's a series of questions. I'm going to try to answer them to the best of my ability. I want to talk a little bit about my humble beginnings, what sort of shaped me and shaped my consciousness. And I have to give a lot of credit to my father.
Mm-hmm.
My father was straight out of Richard Allen Project, so he had some philosophies about the streets, which he made us aware. I was raised up with 4 brothers. It was 5 of us.
Mm-hmm.
So his mission was to give us the things we needed to survive in a society. He came up and was raised pretty much after the Depression. There wasn't a whole lot of opportunities for black men. So what he was doing with us, I didn't know it at the time, but he was instilling in us an Afrocentric mindset, something to go along or something to combat a lot of the oppressive forces that we had to deal with in our black communities. And one of the keys, and I think it still is one of the keys to unlock a lot of the nonsense, is something that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was saying, something that the Honorable Marcus Garvey was saying. And that's an attempt to, or endeavor to know yourself. Mm-hmm. Know where you came from. So I was always being, he was sort of what they would call today like a black nationalist.
Okay.
So he was always instilling stuff in us. He was in the Garvey movement.
Okay.
So
okay.
he followed, and he was always giving us that energy and that spirit. He was a member of the Nation of Islam.
Okay.
So he was once again following a cultural point of view. he was a member of the Philadelphia chapter of the Black Panther Party for self-defense. So, and when I was a little child, like 3 or 4 or 5 coming up, my dad would have posters and pictures of all of these guys in our finished basement. So when I played, I didn't know it then, I was getting the energies. And it was going in. Later, as I got to an adult, I studied and did the research on these individuals. So he gave us another look. He gave us something to combat the indoctrination of all the stuff like I was getting in the schools in their curriculum. And I found out something was different when I was young, Kofi. I always was sort of like a geek kind of guy. I used to like to do book reports and all that type of stuff like that there. But I still did my little mischievous stuff out there, you know, product of the community. And I remember doing book reports, and I used to use 2 different sets. One set was the Encyclopedia Britannica, World Book.
Right.
But my father, I told you, he had things available to us. He had a set of encyclopedias called the Negro Heritage Encyclopedias. Now, when I would do a book report with the World Book Encyclopedias, A's and B's. But when I would use the information out of the Negro Heritage, my paper would come back all red, checked out. So I seen at an early age that there was 2 sets of rules. So that meant I have to take 2 sets of notes. And my house was full of African energy and culture because my father also, he retired from the Merchant Marine, so he would sail around the world. He had been to Africa. He told me he had been to Africa by the time he was 21 3 times.
Okay.
So he knew of some stuff that we just wasn't getting here. So he made sure it was in our home front. I used to get teased about that because we had African drums, spears, masks, all the stuff. And I understand it now because everybody wasn't getting that. So it seemed, you know, to try to cling on to your culture in the 60s and in the 70s, it wasn't all of that a fad because a lot of us was brainwashed, and we still are, to go against our original culture. Now, let me bring it up to the Black Male Community Council of Philadelphia. Black, for instance, because we concerned about our community. We trying to be an asset to the black community. And one of the things I really identified with in the earlier is our motto and our job. You know, it's cultural for us as Africans. One of the things we did is one of our missions as men, one of the definitions of a man in our culture was to protect the women, the elderly, and the children. That was our job. And when you're talking about counsel, I believe that's one of the essences that we need and that our youth need. They need counsel. In African culture, they always had a council of elders. And I just thank God that I have a council of elders that I can follow. Brother Stanley and Brother Kofi have been excellent counsel along with a plethora of other men. It amazes me the quality of men and women. Now, let me go on that. I don't want to leave the women out. See, because in our organization, see, I understand this. And see, in my culture, in my research, there always was a reverence for the women. See, but in the Western culture, it's kind of like male chauvinistic. See, I believe in divine feminine energy. James Brown said, yes, it's a man's world, But a man ain't nothing without a woman or a girl. And it's a completion. We need this energy. And we got some dynamite sisters that's in the background doing what they doing, experts at what they do, and we need them. So when you say the black male community council, it's just not males. But what we say that because in our name, it's like a call out. See, in order for us to deal with a lot of the ills, the gun violence, and the murders perpetrated by the youth, a lot of it is happening because it's a lack of visibility of the black males. Half of them, a good percentage of them, are locked up in the system. Another percentage of them is making a choice to, well, I'm going to just say it like this. They would rather switch than fight. We're asking to call out all the black males from out of the masjids, out of the churches, out of your Masonic temples, and be visible and be models for our youth to see. See, because we have to, you know, the old African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Now, regardless of how ruggish and how crazy these children are acting, they're our children. And we always believe that there's nobody coming to help us. As a community, we have the wherewithal, we have the intelligence, we have the smarts to help our own. And that's what we're doing as a collective. You know, and I really appreciate my brother Stanley and Kofi who put this thing together because it falls in line with my belief system.
Let me ask you this. I want to go back. I love your statements that you have made, particularly many are called but few are chosen. And you were fortunate to be able to have such a male figure in your life in terms of his knowledge of self, and passing that on to you. And you talked about him going to Africa 3 times when he was 21, and how you grew up around all of these energies from a cultural and spiritual aspect. And I know that you, in some of our meetings, you have made some very profound statements to me, particularly as it relates to what we should tolerate as an organization and what we should not tolerate as an organization from a cultural and African-centered spiritual perspective, right? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yes. See, I always like to come from a perspective not of my own. And when I say that, I mean in terms of following and taking the guidance from our ancestors, from our cultural ancestors. I mean, and I think and I believe that they're here with us right now. I remember the first night that we went out. We decided that we was going to find the roughest where all the murders, all the stuff was happening. And we went out that day. And I'll never forget. And what we did was we prayed. We didn't just go out there. We made sacrifices to the ancestors. And I truly believe it's the energy that we're receiving. I think it's nothing we're really doing, you see. I believe that it's the power and the energies from the ancestors who we just standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. See, the answer is always like they have something called Sankofa, looking back and see what's happening, because our ancestors, you know, were phenomenal. We, to survive such a brutal, some of the most brutality ever known to be inflicted on the humankind. We survived that. We survivors of that. So the stuff that's going on right now, I know it seems overwhelming sometimes with all the violence and murder and mayhem, But we had all of this stuff perpetrated on us before, and we still here. So if we look to the ancestors for the solutions, because they survived that, and I believe that all them slaves that came over here out of the belly of them slave ships, that our ancestors rode on their backs, and they're here now. And I believe that that's the energy that we need, and that's the solutions that we're going to lean on to propel us.
And there's an African proverb, there's an African saying that as long as you call the name, the spirit will never die. And when we went out and we said those prayers, we called on those ancestors from that perspective of prayer, and made that sacrifice of time and energy to be able to call their name, to be able to support us from the foundation of what we've been building as it relates to the Black Male Community Council, and that, to me, for those of us who were able to partake in that in that ritual, in that process, has bounded us together to be able to continue our work with a strong foundation of our African ancestry, our African thought process, and not saying Africa from so much of a continent perspective or a landmass, but of the people, the indigenous people that were there, that didn't have no issues or problems with their perspective on God, perspective on the land, perspective on each other as a family before the slave trade, before the European, before the Portuguese, before all of those things that we really had some things going on.
Of course.
And if you think about 400 years of the bondage that we have been under, compared to the thousands of years that we were the caretakers of the world, is a very interesting perspective to be able to hold on to. So Gamel, I'd like you to be able to really be able to continue to talk about your statements of where do you see the Black Male Community Council 5 years from now, and what do you want to see for them from that cultural and spiritual foundation that relates to creating an African concept and African mind?
Well, you said it, Brother Kofi. When it comes to community, the first community, matter of fact, civilization period, was utilized by our ancestors. And I believe that a lot of the situations that we're going through is a direct result with the youth acting out. A lot of this murder and a lot of this stuff is a separation or a disconnect from that energy, from that answers, from our culture, and it's by design. All throughout history, there's been an attack on the black man, black malehood, and you can see it every day, black masculinity. So we need to bring that energy back. You know, I had a conversation just yesterday with a friend of mine over in Newark, New Jersey, my sisters, and I was explaining to her, you know, some of the stuff we do in our community. Because we're not trying to be no secret society. We're not trying to be the head Negro society in charge. We want to get the information out so we can work as a collective, because the problems are asystematic. So we need everybody that's doing everything to function in a unified front. So, and she asked me, and I was talking to her, and I was explaining to her, we just trying to be a template or a blueprint so that we can take and the stuff that we're doing and see, because the same issues that we have in our community, it's in every black community in the country. And it appears that the people that we pay our taxes to, that hold the responsibility of coming up with solutions. It's almost as if you do the research and follow their behavior, they're almost complicit in it. So again, we say, no, we have a right, to secure our own communities. We have the natural right to protect our women, children, and elderly, and we don't need no permission to do it, and we ain't waiting for no permission to do it. We're doing it. Now, where I see us in 5 years, sky's the limit. I see us, if we continue to rely on the energy, the spiritual energy, because it's physical, and it's a spiritual situation that's going on. In another book, they talk about spiritual wickedness in high places. We were just having a discussion about how y'all's President Biden just got this money to really deal with violence. So that's on a federal level, and we should be able to tap into that and utilize, because just like I learned from my brother Kofi, you can't run a revolution broke. So it's going to take spirituality, it's going to take some funding, and it's going to take a collective effort. Now, the more we using now the technology and over the interviews where we can actually put them on the air so we can get out this information, and it's a miracle because I'm not a great fan of social media. But it can be used in very positive ways. Sometimes I refer to social media as the new devil because it's a lot of negativity that's in there. But that's okay. But in the midst of all that, we can use what we need to use to get what we're doing out. And I think that's the collective purpose of these interviews, because we never know. One thing about the internet, it can whip around the world in 5 seconds. So we don't know who we might tap into. So the ancestors can send us somebody that has the same motivation, the same ideas, and have the resources or what have you to do their part. And one of the main reasons, I need to say this in this interview, one of the reasons why I operate and I participate in what we're doing here is simply because when I stand up in front of the Creator, I just don't want to be one of those individuals just regurgitating the problem and not participating in a solution. See, and then he asked me, well, Brother Gamel Aziz, what did you do? He can see that I'm making an effort to do and bring what I bring to the table with such a collective of awesome people in this organization.
Wow. Gamel Aziz, I'm speechless. I applaud you again, and I appreciate the alliance and the friendship that we've been able to build based on our work.
Yes, sir.
And I thank you so much for coming and taking the time out of your busy schedule,
Brother Kofi,
for us to be able to do this interview. Wow, man. The only thing I can say is, wow.
Thank you. Well, see, let me say this. That's simply because I know I have been called to be a leader. I have no problem with that. Most people don't want to be a leader because they're afraid of responsibility.
Sure.
But a good leader has to first learn to follow.
Amen.
And I'm following some leaders in our organization like you and my brother Stanley and a bunch of black male. We all are leaders and we all are followers. We all are teachers and we all are students. Wow. So when that general attitude, like I say, sky's the limit for us. As long as I put or give, if I acknowledge my ancestors.
Wow.
And what they've done.
Wow. Well, hey, y'all heard it. You heard it here first. Black Male Community Council. Boots on the ground, black men standing. We'll be back for the second half of this segment. Right back at you.